We have Erick up next with machine learning vulnerabilities and fabric choices. Two important topics for any security consultant out there today who's going to be doing customer on-site meetings. So Erick, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. It was all the talks so far have been amazing, so I'm glad that I get to go last. It's no pressure at all. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides that I made, and we can just dive right into it. Cool. So yeah, we're going to talk about machine learning vulnerabilities and fabric choices. And fabric choices was the best word I could find, but we'll delve in. So first, who am I, right? I am an AI researcher at Rapid7. I am a PhD candidate at Drexel University in computer science, focusing specifically on InfoSec and how it interacts with game theory. I am allegedly writing a book. I claim to be writing a book. I don't know if it will ever be published. I also do stuff with the DEF CON AI Village and probably other things. I'm sure there are other things that I do. I have 3 children and a wonderful partner. I do that too. So that's who I am. And that's the boring part. So what is machine learning, right? That's what's really exciting to me and probably to the rest of you. So it's a way to convince people that your product's if-then tree is something unique and exciting. It is an incredibly cool and useful technology, which is how I really feel about it. But something that's really important for InfoSec people is that it's software. It's all software, right? It's code, it's not magic. And so, you know, it's something that makes your stonks go up, but it also really does do something with statistics. And this is a real forecast. It's a time series model, right? So in the talk, we're going to cover what machine learning does and how it gets deployed. And then we'll talk about vulnerabilities, some examples of those vulnerabilities and mitigation. And then we're going to talk about something that's on everybody's mind, I'm sure, which is what we're going to wear after the pandemic, right? It's almost maybe over, I hope, and we're all getting vaccinated kind of soon, probably. So we're going to talk about that, materials, right? Different kinds of fabrics, weaves, knits, and so on. And then I'll comment on why I'm always so dressed up. So what does machine learning do? Well, it solves optimization problems. So there are 3 forms of machine learning. That's supervised learning, which given an input, you find the parameters that let the inputs best approximate the outputs, right? This is like your y equals mx plus b. You have all of your x's and all of your y's, and you're trying to find the m and the b that best fit it, right? That line of best fit. You have unsupervised learning, which is that you get a bunch of data points and you say, well, how are these similar? How do these relate to one another? And then you have something called reinforcement learning, which you have an environment and you bang against it until something good happens. And I think of this as the Roomba model of machine learning, where like you have your robot vacuum, and if you've seen it, it kind of bangs against the wall until it figures out which way to turn. That's how reinforcement learning works. In InfoSec, most of our applications are supervised learning. They're, malware classifiers and that sort of stuff. And some are unsupervised. So that's our clustering algorithms, right? Those are the applications that we see in InfoSec. And so when we think about software, when we think about software vulnerabilities, a lot of it comes down to how it gets deployed. So some of these technologies are familiar to us. They're Kubernetes and Docker, right? Containerization. Kubernetes and Docker, I guess I should say Kubernetes and Compose, or Containerd and Docker. It's Flask and Django, right? REST APIs, just your regular Python wrappers to bang HTTP requests against something. And then you have serverless, right? Serverless. That's like putting your model into an AWS Lambda and kind of letting AWS or whoever handle those issues. But some of the technologies are less familiar. And these are technologies like TensorFlow Extended, TFX, which is an API for serving models and spinning up model servers, and MLflow, which is a platform for managing and deploying your models. So I'll talk a little bit more about these. Right, TensorFlow Extended has this client server model. And so everything in green is all of the wrappers that exist around your machine learning model. And the only thing that's actually the machine learning model is that yellow bit that says TensorFlow servable. Everything else is this API for serving the model. And this is not a familiar technology to a lot of InfoSec practitioners. So there's a whole lot of architecture and infrastructure that we need to dig in and understand to kind of make sure that everything is working properly and secure. But what ends up happening a lot of times is that we kind of gloss over the details because it's machine learning and it's scary. But really, it's just software. It's just another framework like Flask or Django or whatever to understand how these models get served and how clients interact with them. And then like MLflow is another sort of flavor of serving these models where you have this model registry, right, that deals with all of the lifecycle management for the models, and then it gets served as a REST endpoint. So you have clients that are sort of throwing HTTP requests against this REST endpoint, and then it's interacting with your model. And again, the models are software, right? And so we dig into that and we think about kinds of classes of ML vulnerabilities that we can see. So we have the vulnerabilities that crop up in training. We have the vulnerabilities that crop up in inference. And then we have the vulnerabilities that crop up in deployment. And the ones that we tend to focus on that get a lot of press are the vulnerabilities in inference and to some lesser extent vulnerabilities in training. But the kind of vulnerabilities that look the most like what we know and will end up having the biggest impact are these vulnerabilities in deployment. So I'll give some examples. Vulnerabilities in training, our biggest one is model poisoning. And this diagram is pulled directly from a paper looking at that. So what is model poisoning? It's when bad data are injected into the training data set. So you have a training data set and some bad actor has the ability to insert maliciously chosen points into your data set. And well, why do they do that? Well, they do that because it forces misclassification. On these, what these diagrams are showing is that it takes your decision boundary and it sort of shifts it over so that it starts misclassifying certain points. And some models are more vulnerable to this than others, right? You don't see this as much with decision tree type models. You see this much more in support vector machines and in linear classifiers and logistic regression. These are super vulnerable to that kind of attack. And it's also really hard to detect because if you have a bad ETL pipeline that's building a data set for you, and you have this model that's being trained on this, generated data set, the impact might be exactly the same as somebody maliciously inserting bad data into your pipeline. So you see this big cluster of red points on the far right on that B diagram. You could have something, right? You could have an ETL pipeline that just assigns the same label to all the points. And they end up getting clustered right there and it messes up your decision boundary. That's the same exact thing as somebody maliciously setting all of those points to have the same value to move your decision boundary. So it's really hard to detect this. So if we want to mitigate it, there are kind of two things that we can do, and that's integrity checking your data set. So taking snapshots of your data sets that are known good and having just like a hash or a checksum and seeing when your data set changes, right? And then input validation, sanity checking what gets input into your data set, the same way that you would do input validation on SQL database or anything else that you're doing there, right? So when we talk about vulnerabilities in inference, these are much cooler. These are what people get excited about. And I will talk more about these two diagrams in a moment. But adversarial examples are specially crafted samples. They're images or 3D objects or whatever that you submit to a classifier. And the intent is that it forces them to be misclassified, but it does it in a different way. Rather than having the model changed to misclassify these samples, we specifically craft a sample that forces misclassification. And in this sample on the right, on the top right, this is a 3D printed turtle, and it was a GIF that worked, but it's not working anymore. But it's from this paper that is called the turtle rifle paper. And they 3D printed, these researchers 3D printed a turtle that Google Cloud Vision classified as a rifle, no matter how they turned it, no matter how they twisted it. And like that has obvious impacts, right? You don't want your computer vision algorithm to think that a turtle is a firearm. That could, lead to pretty bad things, especially if you think about plugging this sort of thing into CCTV, right? You have like a real Big Brother scenario where it sees these 3D printed turtles and you get a ping that, hey, there's a rifle on, such and such intersection, and you dispatch police there, and all of a sudden you have a potential, real world issue to deal with. So we can do it with these 3D objects, and we can also do it with paper. So the bottom, this Granny Smith apple with the word iPod on a piece of paper stuck to it, is from a recent paper out of the OpenAI research group. And they found that essentially this computer vision algorithm that they developed overgeneralizes. It's too good. It's too clever. So when it sees iPod, right, it goes, oh yeah, I know what an iPod is. That's an iPod. Rather than contextually, looking at it and being like, I don't care what that word is, that's an apple, right? It's actually reading and trying to infer based on what it's reading, which is a little terrifying and kind of funny. So the math is very cool, but the impact is often not very exciting. So the math is what gets me really hyped. There's all kinds of cool things around information geometry and gradients and incredibly boring stuff that excites like 6 people. But the impact of these attacks is often like not super exciting. If we think about an adversarial example in the InfoSec context, you could use something like reinforcement learning, which is what some researchers at, I think it's Endgame, and hopefully they'll yell at me if I'm wrong, did. They used reinforcement learning to kind of bang malware samples against VirusTotal until one didn't get detected by any of the AV engines. And then it was like, okay, well, now I've evaded, detection. But of course, once that malware goes out into the wild, heuristic detections and signatures will be written. And so it's not really that exciting. So the impact, right, or the mitigation, if you don't want adversarial examples to work, sort of the 2 best techniques for avoiding that are things that your data scientists or your ML engineers are going to need to do. And that's using adversarial training, where it generates these adversarial examples and says, hey, classify these correctly. And that sort of smooths out the decision boundary, and ensemble voting, where you have a bunch of models running together, and it's hard to craft adversarial examples that are going to defeat both a decision tree and a neural network and a support vector machine. And so they vote, and the majority of models that decide on a class is the class that it surfaces. Yeah, but the real vulnerabilities that are scary in machine learning that, again, I think we don't talk enough about are the vulnerabilities, the actual vulnerabilities, right? And so these are vulnerabilities in server architectures. So these are just vulnerabilities in Django, Flask, and I think Docker. Vulnerabilities in your machine learning library. This is a big one, and this is something that really doesn't get a lot of exposure because it's mostly lived in academic circles. But we've had vulnerabilities in machine learning libraries where you have denial of service conditions and memory corruption vulnerabilities that happen when the model does certain things. So if we think back to that ML flow or that TFX example, if you're not thoroughly auditing that architecture because, oh, well, I don't know what this is, it's machine learning. And so you have basically unvalidated input going into something that could have vulnerable libraries. Well, that's a huge concern. So knowing what your machine learning algorithms are doing, the libraries that they're using, and actually gaining some familiarity with commonly used libraries like TensorFlow, PyTorch, scikit-learn can really help us, keep these vulnerabilities out. Because even if you are able to validate that server architecture that's letting your models basically be exposed to the world, knowing the vulnerabilities within those libraries is going to help protect us a lot. Then we have vulnerabilities in the model itself. This is a cool one. So this particular CVE corresponds to a vulnerability in the, I think it was Proofpoint email security appliance. Muhax, Will Pierce, did a phenomenal presentation at DerbyCon, I want to say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, talking about this vulnerability. He created a copycat model and basically used information that the model was leaking to craft phishing emails that bypass the email security appliance. Super cool. It's a talk all unto itself. Drop me a DM or drop something in the channel. I'll link it to you. It's really cool. But this is another real vulnerability. And then another vulnerability that was actually just pushed out by Trail of Bits is this thing called Fickling. So a lot of these ML models, when they get saved, are pickled. We use the pickle library to save these models. And pickling is, of course, a form of serialization. So this opens us up to some post hoc manipulation that you can do of these saved ML models to create deserialization vulnerabilities. And it's really, really cool and really, really terrifying. And I'm looking forward to more research coming out on these sorts of deserialization vulnerabilities. So mitigating these vulnerabilities, right? Patching, and that includes patching your machine learning libraries, patching your models to be updated to use these updated machine learning libraries. And this can be a problem because a lot of times these libraries have very specific functions that get deprecated, but because they're written by data scientists and not security people or software engineers, they just ignore the deprecation warnings. The number of ML models you'll see that just ignore all warnings is truly horrifying. So eventually you say, well, okay, well, we're pinned to this version. We're stuck on this version. And that version may have, right, some real vulnerabilities in it. So then you have to think about model assessment, right? Actually trying to pen test your models, trying to see if these Fickling attacks will work, or if the model itself is leaking information that could lead to it being bypassed. And then, of course, systems testing, right? Not just unit testing, but testing how everything works together, and input validation. It should go without saying, but a lot of models get deployed to the internet and do no input validation. They just let you upload an image, and they don't do any file magic checking or anything like that. They just let you basically input arbitrary data to a machine learning model. And as we know, that's not really the best thing to do. So I'm going to transition very smoothly here. But if everything is AI, do I still need to wear pants? I know that's what you're thinking after me talking about those vulnerabilities, because this was a very casual segue. And yes, you probably will have to wear pants. You might be able to get away with wearing skirts or dresses, but you will probably have to wear something on your legs. But you don't have to wear jeans. Jeans are terrible. Jeans are terrible, and I'm going to make that argument here. If you like jeans, you're free to wear them. These are pictures of people who wear clothes that I like. Yeah, so first I want to talk about materials. And this slide was messed up, so I'm just going to reveal it. So we've got kind of these three materials. So we've got our cotton, right? And everybody knows cotton. It's very common. It's usually pretty inexpensive. It's very familiar. And there are tons of weaves of cotton that we're going to get into. You've got linen, which is produced from the hemp plant, not hemp, flaxseed plant. And I'm not just talking about bed sheets, but linen sheets do rule. Linen starts out very scratchy, but it becomes buttery soft. And the prices of linen can range from extremely cheap to insanely expensive. But it's all good, especially in the summer. The only caveat with linen is that it wrinkles horribly. It's incredibly wrinkly, but if you embrace the wrinkle life, it's a wonderful fabric, again, especially when it's humid out. Wool gets a bad reputation, and I'm going to talk a lot more about wool later. There's tons of variation in wools. There are tons of variation in prices, and you can wear wool all year, all year. It's my favorite fabric. I am currently wearing head to toe wool. My socks are wool. My pants are wool. This jacket is wool. It's all wool. It's my favorite fabric. So let's talk about corduroy. Corduroy has a mythical origin, the Corduroy, which is my terrible French. Apologies to all French people and Canadians listening. The cord of the king, right? But in real life, it's actually an industrial workwear fabric. And so the cords in the corduroy, right, you can see them there. I picked a really thick plush wale is what it's called. So thicker wale is usually softer. It has that nice nap. You can like see it if you rub your hand up it. And thin wale is very hard wearing. That's like, it's hard to put holes in thin wale corduroy. It's just as tough as jeans, just as tough as denim. And corduroy shirts exist. Shorts exist too, but shirts exist. And corduroy shirts are a really nice way to add some texture to an outfit. I really like corduroy shirts. They have thin wale corduroy shirts that are super lightweight, that are great for the summer. Really, I love corduroy. And one of my favorite things about corduroy is that it's very easy to dress up, or it's very easy to wear casually. It's really just about what you wear with it. You know, a pair of corduroys with a t-shirt and like a denim jacket is a super great workwear look that is very casual, but like they make corduroy suits that look really good, actually. So the next cotton fabric or cotton weave I want to talk about is peak. Peak is like polo shirt material. If you have a polo shirt, if you own any polo shirt that isn't like an Under Armour or a Nike polo, it is probably cotton peak. And the reason for that is because they're great for the summer. It's a very breathable material. You can see kind of that texture. You've got like the little air pockets in it. You can really get air through it. It's almost like a mesh kind of weave, but not mesh enough that you're not allowed to wear it to work. And like they make polos out of peak, but what the real secret with peak is sweatshirts. Because sometimes you get like those cool, breezy summer nights, and you want something that lets you live through the humidity, but not be cold if the wind blows. And I will say peak pants have a very interesting texture. They can be difficult to find, but cotton peak as pants make a very interesting texture, and they're super cool, especially in like dark colors. It gives a really nice look. And cotton cashmere peak is cozy. It is a really good fabric, again, especially for like late spring, early summer, maybe into fall. It's really, really good. Kind of those transitional seasons. Oxford. Oxford is another cotton I want to talk about. When you think Oxford, you think Oxford button-down shirts, right? Oxford cloth button-downs are practically a meme on the fashion internet, especially like the menswear internet. Our male fashion advice on Reddit, it's OCBD is a well understood acronym. And I wear them all the time, not right now, but I wear them a lot. And, you know, they look nice enough, but it's a durable fabric. You can wear an Oxford cloth button down forever, and they get softer with wear. They're really durable shirts. They can hold on for a long time. And another nice thing about Oxford is it's surprisingly resistant to wrinkles. So you can wear Oxford cloth shirts under sport coats or whatever, right? If you're on a client-facing engagement, nobody is going to poo-poo you for wearing an Oxford cloth shirt. But you're going to be sitting down all day. You're going to be in a car. You're going to be in like 6 Ubers. And it should stay unwrinkled so that you can, you know, reasonably wear it again the next day without having to iron it, if you, you know, are into that. And it comes in a lot of weights, right? So when you think about fabric weight, it's how thick it is. You can have really thin Oxford shirts that are, you know, better for the summer. And you can have really heavy, like 14-gram Oxford shirts. And those are going to be almost canvas-like in their thickness. And yeah, it's usually a shirting fabric, but they do make Oxford pants. I have owned Oxford pants. There's nothing wrong with Oxford pants. Yeah, but it's usually seen as a shirting fabric. So broadcloth and poplin are the next cotton fabric I want to talk about. It's very smooth. It is a smooth kind of basket weave cotton fabric. So one thing with broadcloth and poplin is that they're 2 names for the same weave, but broadcloth yarns are thicker and poplin yarns are thinner. So broadcloth is good for like, right, it's much dressier than Oxford. So it's a good dress shirt fabric. If you're going to a wedding in the summer, you want to wear poplin. If you're going to a wedding in the fall or spring or winter, you might want to wear broadcloth because it's going to be heavier. And it's both much cooler than Oxford. So either one of them is going to be cooler wearing. Broadcloth and Oxford of the same weight. Broadcloth is going to be cooler wearing because of that basket weave. And then cotton twill is the next fabric I want to hit on. And cotton twill, it's super common pant fabric. You probably own cotton twill fabric. As a matter of fact, almost all chinos, which is like Dockers or khakis or whatever you call them or your friends call them. They're all cotton twill. They're all cotton twill. And so recently there have been a lot more blends with elastane or spandex for stretch, which is super nice. There was a lot of stigma around blending these stretch materials into cotton twill for a long time. And I'm very, very glad that people have come around to it. And it's just a comfortable, classic year-round fabric. It comes in a million colors. Any color you want chinos in, they come in. Think of a color, it comes in it. And so linen is the next fabric I want to talk about. We're done with cotton. We're talking about linen because it is starting to get hot. I'm down in North Carolina, so it's already hot, but it'll be cold in 2 days or something. I don't know. I just moved here. I don't understand it yet. But it's warming up, so linen is great. And it gets very wrinkled. I talked about this earlier. As soon as you put on linen, it will be wrinkled. You either need to embrace the wrinkle life or keep a very hot iron nearby all the time. It starts out scratchy, and that's especially true if it's poor quality linen. But the good news is it gets really, really soft with wear, even if it's poor quality. So if you put on a linen shirt because you watched this talk and you were like, I would like to wear a linen shirt, this seems great, and you put it on your body and it's incredibly uncomfortable and you write me a mean email, I will understand. But I will reassure you that if you just wear it and wash it, it will soften up and it will become your favorite thing. Another thing about linen is you can get linen everything. You can wear all linen outfits, shirts, sweaters. I have a linen jacket, trousers. They all look great. It's all great. Linen has a really nice drape. The wrinkles, again, like once you embrace them, they're kind of fun. It gives you like a very loose, nonchalant look. It's really nice. I love linen. Linen dresses and skirts also. I should not be so focused on what I wear, but linen skirts and dresses also exist, and I assume are just as wonderful. So wool. Okay, we're going to finish this whole presentation. We're going to talk about wool. There are many, many, many types of wool. There's lamb's wool. So there are different types of sheep. Different breeds of sheep have different types of wool. So there's Shetland wool and merino wool are two common types. So Shetland wool is that like scratchy, curly wool that you probably imagine when you think of like wool sweaters. And there's regular lamb's wool that is also kind of like that. And then there's merino wool. Merino wool is much smoother. It's much nicer. It's pleasant to wear against your skin. It's very temperature regulating. Merino wool is incredible. Really, really cool stuff. And then you have wool from basically any animal that has hair. Alpaca wool is super soft. It's lovely. Mohair, if you've ever seen a photograph of like somebody in a tuxedo and it just looks amazing, it's like a nighttime tuxedo photo, it's probably a mohair tux. It photographs incredibly. It drapes beautifully. It's very temperature regulating. It's not super comfortable, but it looks great. Cashmere, I assume that most people are familiar with cashmere. Cashmere is very soft. It is very pleasant. Angora comes from the Angora rabbit. It is very soft, and they do not have to harm the bunny to take its fur. So it is about as ethical as any other animal-based fabric. And camel hair. Camel is actually a really, really nice material. It's very soft, feels great, looks great. I love camel. It is pricey. So why is wool so scratchy? Right, and here are some incredibly scratchy sweaters for the illustration. Well, number one is the type of wool, right? Merino, cashmere, and Angora are actually easy to wear against the skin, but something like what's over here on the right, which are, as far as I can tell, all Shetland sweaters, is not. Then there's quality, which is, of course, a factor, right? Even merino wool, if you get one of those like Uniqlo merino wool sweaters, it may be a little bit scratchy at first because it doesn't have as much lanolin. It's really mass produced. They use like really cheap stuff. Uniqlo in particular also uses slave labor, so not the best company. And then weave is a big factor. That's like your knit, right? And you're probably thinking of itchy wool sweaters, which are knit from lamb's wool. So we're going to talk about these fabrics, right? These weaves, these knits that you have in wool. And the first is flannel. I want to talk about wool flannel. My pants are wool flannel. They look just like the ones on top. And flannel does not describe a plaid cotton shirt. It is a gentle nap on a soft wool. So there are different grades of wool, and I don't have nearly enough time to go into all of them and how much I love wool. But when somebody talks about a wool flannel, it's usually just a gentle nap. It's got like a little bit of hair to it, right? If you pull it one way or push it another, it kind of goes up and down with the hairs. That's what a wool flannel is. And wool flannel pants are softer than sheep sweats, and they look way better. Literally, I've been wearing these pants all day. I curled up on the little egg chair we have outside with my partner. They are just as comfortable as sheep sweatpants, and they look a million times better. And worsted wool flannels make great suits. This jacket is worsted wool, and I know how we feel as InfoSec people about suits in general, but they make great suits. And if you're looking for a suit, you should take care to look for worsted wool flannels. That's going to be your most flexible, most comfortable option, because I know that comfort is paramount. Next type of wool I want to talk about is the tropical wool. So you can see that kind of almost basket weave in that tropical wool. So it's a very lightweight wool. They use really light wool fibers and they weave it in that basket weave. It's highly temperature regulating, so you've got airflow in and out. And wool in general is very temperature regulating because, I mean, I don't know, it is. I don't know the science, I'm sorry. But tropical wool is great for the summer and it's great for humidity. Yes, wool in the summer, it's second to linen only. It is absolutely one of my favorite things to wear in the summer. It feels like I'm wearing nothing at all. It's just incredible. And so the third, and I believe final wool weave is twill. So wool twills are fantastic. Cotton twills, right? It's that chino. You can see here these sort of diagonal weave patterns that you also saw with the cotton twill, but in this case it's wool. So it's just like cotton twill and it drapes beautifully. And when I talk about drape, I mean like you put it on your body kind of the way that it hangs on your body. The way that the twill sits, it just looks great on everybody. The accent, just the way that it sits is incredible. It photographs incredibly too. And when you walk, it kind of moves with you. It's awesome. There are two primary types of wool twill. So there's cavalry twill, which is that double twill. And you can see in the left picture, right? You've kind of got like two lines going through it. That's a cavalry twill. And then you have whipcord, which is on the right. and that's a single twill. So cavalry twill, as the name implies, comes from horseback riding, right? It is designed not to, not to get messed up when you're sitting on a saddle. So that's probably good enough for sitting in a chair or for going out to lunch. Whipcord is designed not to get snagged on branches. It's a hunting fabric is its origin. And so they're super hard wearing and they will almost always get compliments. So now that you know how wonderful wool and linen and cotton fabrics are, you never need to wear jeans again. You are free to, but you never need to. Jeans are stiff pants. They're designed for working outdoors. And you're probably more of an indoor creature. Chinos are comfortable. They're softer. They move more nicely because the twill weave is a little bit easier than the warp and weft of denim. And again, they come in any color and cut on earth you could possibly want. Wool flannel trousers are secretly sweatpants. Nobody will know. The outfit that I'm wearing is basically a t-shirt and sweats, but nobody knows. And it's great. It's the best secret on earth. And there's nothing wrong with t-shirts and jeans, but you might be actually physically more comfortable in some of these alternatives. And don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Like in stores or from people. If you're like, hey, I would like to wear other clothes, but I've worn t-shirts and jeans my whole life, and it just feels like the default casual clothing option. What do I do? People who like clothes typically love to help. So yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. I use my real name everywhere. I'm extremely easy to find on the internet. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's my @. So that is all I have. And if we have any questions, I would love to take them.
Yeah, I don't see any questions. Does anybody have any questions? I don't have any flagged in the chat. I see lots of comments about how everybody's realized their style game is about to be upgraded, but.
Well, that is incredibly.
Josh says he's adding you on Twitter right now for fashion advice.
Well, I guess I'll have to start posting actual fashion advice on Twitter instead of,
I've got about 11 pages of people saying, oh, I was doing that wrong all along, but I don't see any questions. So I think people are just excited about seeing more from you in this arena on both topics. So
I actually just saw a question from Emily, and I would really.
There we go. Yes. Have you worked with people with sensory issues, and do they share your opinions?
Yeah. So my wife has horrific sensory issues, and so does my middle son. And so they don't love wool. We have to be a lot more conscious of the fabric choices that they're wearing. My wife is really sensitive to basically all natural fibers. So she does have to work with like cotton poly blends, but we found a lot of success with like high quality linen as well. As long as it gets past that scratchy phase, it's really good. But again, like cotton peak is good and cotton twills have been good. But she does wear a lot of t-shirts and jeans. So
that's wonderful. And you had a perfect answer for that as well. Thank you. There's another question here from Andrew. You talked about an optimization problem, and Andrew is asking if that's a common term that Andrew should know, or if it's a niche one.
Yeah, maybe I was a little bit too cavalier with my use of just an optimization problem. Never use the word just. So when I say optimization problem, I mean like minimizing or maximizing a value. So in machine learning, in particular, you have a loss function, which is basically like how far away I am from the value. So if you think of like your classic y = mx + b linear algebra problem, when you take M and Y and you try and calculate that difference, right, and you have a bunch of them, the distance that your default value of M is, say you set M equal to 1, so it's just Y equals X, how far away your predicted Y is from your actual Y value is your loss, it's your error. And so minimizing that is the optimization problem. You want to find parameters that minimize that loss. So you're as unwrong as you can be.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and sharing a topic that was apparently something that was really on people's minds. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.